Surgeons of Reddit, what has been your biggest OS **** moment? I woke up during the last part of my gallbladder removal. I felt this pressure, as my surgeon, had him for a prior operation, funny guy, was trying to close one of the wounds. I lifted my head, we locked eyes, and he had this startled "oh fuck" look. Then he snapped back to normal, said patience up, and the anesthetist was on that shit. Woke up an hour later in recovery. Veterinarian here. This happened in my 4th year of vet school. I watched a bull stomp his own intestines. A very valuable bull had an obstruction in his intestines that needed to be removed. People will only put the amount of money a food animal is worth into surgery to fix it, so we had to do this on the cheap. Full anesthesia on an animal that big is crazy expensive, so we did a standing surgery. What that means is the bull is put in a chute, numbed up really well, and other than light sedation they are totally awake and standing for surgery. So the surgeons make a 2 to 3 foot vertical incision in his right flank and start pulling out armfuls of intestines and handing them to me and the other vet student assistants. There's a sterile drape on the bull and we're all in full sterile gowns. The obstruction was pretty bad, so they had to remove a couple feet of damaged intestines and then sew the ends back together. There is a lot of blood. A lot. The bull is starting to get stressed, impatient, and weak from blood loss. It starts kicking at the chute and trying to move. It gets more sedatives and the surgeons try to sew faster. Everyone is sweating, and there's a lot of swearing going on. The puddle of blood at our feet is getting bigger. The bull does a side shuffle and the intestines being held by another student are trapped between the bull's ribs and the metal bars of the chute. This is bad. Even a few seconds of this can do permanent damage. The bull is too heavy to just shove over, so they remove one of the side rails of the chute to free the intestines. The bull is getting really pissed off and now is trying to lunge from side to side, and we are ordered to let go of the intestines we are holding to keep the bull from breaking our arms against the rails of the chute. The bull is really freaking out and manages to get partially and then completely out of the chute and starts running around the room mooing and stomping and ripping huge chunks of intestines out of itself. Blood and guts are everywhere. Gallons of blood. Keep in mind this room is in a barn, and while the area around the chute was clean, the rest of the room is covered in hay and dirt. Some huge guys managed to subdue the bull and wrestle it to the ground, and they give it more sedatives and pain meds. My job was to sit on his shoulder. Another bigger student is sitting on his head. Everything is a complete fucking fiasco at this point, and I just felt so terrible for the poor bull who was bellowing non-stop. They wash off his mangled intestines as best as they can, stitch the ends together, dump a shit ton of penicillin in his abdomen and close him up. The bull survived surgery and then was hospitalized and got tons of IV antibiotics and fluids and care. Every day his temperature got higher until he finally died a week later from a massive infection in his abdomen. So that was awful. I have absolutely no idea what they told the owner. As far as I know, no one got sued. Craziest, probably a medical student passing out face first into the wound, then falling backwards and cracking his skull on the floor. He starts bleeding from the head and isn't moving. Just total silence for a few seconds. We didn't know whether to laugh or yell at him, or what. Heh. Luckily I didn't have to have that talk with the family. Favorite. When I was a student, my chief resident was sleeping with one of my friends who was also a student. We were both operating with the chief of surgery when someone pages the chief during surgery. The nurse looked at it and said it wasn't important. Chief gets annoyed and asks her I just call it back. She replies it was a text page. Would he like her to read it? He says yes. It was my friend telling him she wanted to meet him in a call room after he was done. Paraphrasing here. Another awkward silence. Residents sleeping with students is a no-no, and having them page you in surgery is one too. But the chief of surgery was having an affair with the nurse. We all knew it, so after a rapid fire exchange of significant glances around the table, we all shut the hell up and finished the case and never spoke of it again. I doubt you'll get too many real stories. Mine is extremely rare, as I was the patient, but awake for the surgery. I was supposed to have a bump on my back removed. Nothing huge, just a lump of some kind. For insurance reasons they did it as an ambulatory in the or of a hospital instead of the surgeon's actual office. So, I'm wide awake, face down in the OR. I had picked him as my surgeon, because his main practice was plastic surgery. At the time I lifted weights a lot, and spent a lot of time working my back. I wanted as small a scar as possible. I was vain. He begins with the first incision, then goes for a second, larger, then goes deeper, I guess, and realizes the bump is just the extruding tip of a cyst that cut through my back to the back of my lungs. He wasn't used to operating on alert patients. As soon as he realizes, he just says, "Oh fuck." That was the beginning of a 4-hour surgery for which I was awake. What they cut out of me was the size of an adult fist. Enclosing the wound they drew in so much flesh, for lack of a better word, because of my lack of medical understanding, that my right arm became essentially inflexible. I couldn't lift weights for years. All that precious work shot down the drain. What an asshole I was. My first C-section was quite the shocker, but after that not a lot faced me anymore. This event occurred during one of my internships as a high schooler to see if medicine would be my field. Why, I'm not sure, but they let me attend a C-section. They placed me at the feet of the woman that was numb chest down. I give her a little nod and the operation starts. Well, no one had thought to tell me that once the belly is cut, the liquids go out too. This is a logical thing, but I was seated at least 3 meters from the feet of said woman and the fluids gushing from her abdomen came all the way to my feet. Here is me, standing in a woman's pregnancy fluids. Oh. Fuck. I must have looked very shocked, because the other surgeons had a laugh about my reaction. Ever since, I've not been shocked once. This one's from my dad. We were putting up a central line for a drip with an 18G needle, 2 millimeters relatively big compared to most needles, in the patient's external jugular, and all of a sudden the needle went right into the jugular. We all started panicking, because usually with a drip the needle is meant to come out and only the plastic remains, but now we had lost the needle inside this guy's jugular. Before we could even fish it out it was gone. I looked at the fellow surgeons and nurses, and before we could do anything we rushed him right into theater. After a few minutes we fished the needle out near his subclavian vein closer towards the shoulder and we breathed a sigh of relief. From /u/I'm Ked Nurse. I was in charge in the unit the other day, and this happened. We had a patient in the ICU who had some big abdomen trauma. He had gone to the OR, and was too sick to be able to close his abdomen, so we left it open. We had a piece of plastic covering, like a bag, covering his intestines, and then we placed a vacuumed sponge dressing on top of that, called a wound vac. The patient's nurse called me into the room to look at the abdomen, because she thought she saw pieces of the bowel seeping out of the bag and getting sucked against the wound vac. I agreed and thought the bowel looked pretty dusky as well, so we called the doc to come and look at it. The resident agreed and talked to his attending who told him to take the wound vac off, tuck the bowel back into the bag it had escaped from, and put a new wound vac on. It all just sounded like it was going to be a disaster, but whatever. So, resident comes in, takes off the wound vac and the bowels had become very swollen from the fluids, trauma, etc. So when he took the wound vac off, they all slipped out of the patient. The bag had dislodged significantly. We would tuck the bowels in one side, they'd spill out the other. Here we had this guy in his bed, disemboweling, and we simply could not get everything back in him, in the bag, or anything. Luckily, the drugs we had the patient on kept him very nicely sedated, and we had other drugs to control any problems with his blood pressure, and the guy wasn't overtly bleeding. It was messy. We really just had to step back and say, well, shit, how do we get this guy's guts back inside him? Ended up having to call in 6 other people to help tuck things here and there until he could get back to or for them to get everything back into its proper place. Way back in the day, pre-op was done with alcohol-based cleaners. Naked, sedated guy with a light sheen of cleaning fluid on him plus static electric spark equals fully engulfed in flames. Everyone just stood there for a second till someone grabbed a sheet and put out the flames. Surgery went well, no complications, slight suntan. Balboa Navy Medical Center, San Diego. Old surgeon.